Oh, please, are you kidding?
Yeah.
Now come on, let's get serious.
So everything is good for you and Patty.
Let's get serious.
Aretha Franklin's voice could stop a room, but her presence carried the same weight. She didn't just dominate the stage, she dominated the spaces around her, and that often meant friction with people who thought they were standing on equal ground. Some of those clashes turned into whispered stories that fans kept alive for years. Patti LaBelle, for example, learned quickly that what looked like shade in public could turn into headlines that never went away.
Patti LaBelle.
No, that was ridiculous. That is the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Tina Turner, on the other hand, found herself caught in a storm of comparisons that neither woman wanted to lose.
And the Grammys made the mistake of calling Tina Queen. You know about it. Ooh, you know who was there? Aretha. That big was...
These weren't random squabbles. They were moments that revealed how Aretha navigated respect, competition, and control in an industry where only one person could sit at the very top. Her genius was undeniable, but so was her fire, and together they made her both loved and feared. Here are some Aretha Franklin feuds you might not have heard about.
There was a group called the Flamingos, that big group at that time, and my sister and I were big fans of them.
Aretha Franklin wasn't the only one in her family with talent. Her sisters Irma and Carolyn had strong voices too, and they all grew up under the same roof with music running through their blood. But with Aretha's star shining so bright, it was hard for the others to step out of her shadow. Carolyn almost had her big moment when Curtis Mayfield wanted her to record the songs for the Sparkle soundtrack. But once Aretha got wind of it, she swooped in and took over the project herself. Irma later admitted she thought Carolyn should have been given the chance first, and then Aretha could have done her own version. To her, it felt like Carolyn was robbed of what could have been her breakthrough. Irma had her own shot when a record deal came her way, and she thought her sister would cheer her on. Instead, Aretha flipped. She didn't like the idea of multiple Franklin sisters competing in the same industry, convinced it would blur the brand she had built. Irma felt crushed, realizing her dreams didn't seem to matter as much as protecting Aretha's spotlight. That was the tug of war in their family. They loved each other, but they also clashed because everyone wanted their own piece of success. Aretha often acted like she was protecting them, but her protection came off more like control. Irma and Carolyn admired her, but they also struggled with always being second to her career. Even as time passed, that tension never fully went away. They still performed together here and there, but disagreements followed them too. At the end of the day, the bond as sisters was real, yet the fight to stand out in a family where one person towered above the rest made it complicated. Next is Patti LaBelle.
Patti LaBelle.
No, that was ridiculous. That is the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Aretha and Patti LaBelle had fans scratching their heads for years. People couldn't figure out if they were really close or if something else was bubbling under the surface. Both of them kept saying they respected each other, but little moments kept people guessing. The most talked about one was that clip from the White House concert where Patti stretched out her hand and Aretha breezed right past like nothing happened. The internet had a field day, turning it into memes and jokes. Patti later brushed it off, laughing like it wasn't even a thing, but fans weren't convinced. Then came the pie wars. Patti's sweet potato pies blew up, and soon after, Aretha popped out with her own food line. She even made a sly comment about moving Patti's pies over. It looked like playful shade to some, straight-up competition to others. Patti kept it light, insisting there was never any drama, but the timing had people talking. The mess didn't stop there. Some fake story came out claiming Patti threw hands at Aretha, and while everyone else laughed, Aretha wasn't joking around. She dragged the site to court, saying the lie hurt her name. Still, it was worth noting that Aretha had trusted Patti enough years earlier to sing one of her most personal songs at a big tribute. Patti herself always admitted that Aretha's sharp edges came out when she wasn't feeling her best, but she never let that erase the fact that Aretha was her biggest influence. When Aretha announced she was stepping away from music, Patty's reaction showed how much she cared. And when Aretha was gone, Patty made it clear that despite the awkward clips, the jokes, and the whispers, her admiration never wavered. Their story was messy, sure, but it was also layered with love. Then we have Tina Turner.
And the Grammys made the mistake of calling Tina Queen. You know about it. Ooh, you know who was there? Aretha. That big was...
Aretha carried herself like she owned the crown, and in her world, no one else was allowed to touch it. Tina Turner, different story. Tina had her own fire, and that made things messy between the two of them. Their clash wasn't just about music, it felt personal. Like Aretha had zero patience for anyone she thought might step into her lane. The bad blood stretched back further than people realize, with whispers about Aretha being a little too close to Ike Turner back in the day. But the drama really bubbled over when Tina got that big stage moment with Beyoncé introducing her as the Queen. Aretha, watching from home, wasn't having it. To her, that was crossing a line, and she let everybody know she felt disrespected. Tina didn't stay quiet either. She clapped back, poking at Aretha's ego, and from there it turned into a back and forth that spilled into the press. Even later on, when both women were older and battling health struggles, the competition didn't stop. There were even stories about Tina planning her funeral with the intention of making it grander than Aretha's. It sounded extreme, but it showed just how deep the rivalry ran. Two legends, two giant legacies, and neither willing to let the other steal the spotlight. Next, Natalie Cole. Natalie Cole came into the game with big shoes to fill as Nat King Cole's daughter, but she carved out her own lane fast. Her early wins had critics buzzing that she could actually snatch the Queen of Soul crown from Aretha. That talk hit a nerve, especially when Natalie snagged a Grammy that had basically belonged to Aretha for nearly a decade. Suddenly, what should have been a celebration turned into fuel for a rivalry. Their first face-to-face wasn't pretty either. Natalie tried to show respect at a banquet, only to be met with a cold stare and a brush off. For someone who idolized Aretha, it felt brutal. She couldn't figure out why her hero seemed to treat her like a threat instead of a peer. On the flip side, Aretha hated the comparisons. She thought people were blowing things out of proportion and insisted that anyone sounding close to her was just copying what she'd already perfected. To her, nobody could undo the years she spent building her legacy, and Natalie's rise didn't change that. What it really showed was how hard it was for two women at the top to coexist when the world kept putting them in the same ring. Dionne Warwick is next.
Later.
I've been knowing both of those girls forever and a day. I know my sister Dionne, it ain't nothing to her. It ain't nothing. Now, Ree is a little bit different.
Aretha and Dionne Warwick were two women who defined very different lanes in music. Aretha had that raw, church-born fire in her voice, while Dionne carried herself with a polished, smooth style that dominated the pop charts. On the surface, they were both queens in their own right, but behind it all, things between them were messy. It started getting heated when Aretha flipped one of Dionne's biggest songs into her own. She didn't just record it, she brought in Whitney Houston, Dionne's own cousin, to sing in the background. That was a statement, and everyone knew it. Aretha's version ended up being the one people talked about, and even the man who wrote the song leaned in her direction. For Dionne, that had to sting. Years later, the rivalry didn't cool off. When both women landed on Clive Davis's label, Aretha hated feeling like she had to share space with someone she never saw as an equal. Then Whitney came along, and suddenly Aretha was looking at a younger, fresher star linked right back to Dionne's family. That connection made her even more defensive. The tension boiled over again during Whitney's funeral. Dionne claimed a bond that Aretha flat out rejected, and from there, the shade wasn't subtle anymore. Aretha made it clear they had never been friends, while Dionne kept putting on a softer front in public. Even after Aretha passed, Dionne called her a friend, which for many just sounded like one last twist in a rivalry that never really died. And lastly, Luther Vandross. Aretha linking up with Luther Vandross sounded like a dream on paper. Luther had worshipped her since he was a kid, so getting the call to work on her comeback album felt like winning the lottery. But the first time they actually spoke, the energy threw him off. She introduced herself as Miss Franklin and addressed him as Mr. Vandross, keeping things stiff and formal. For someone who had spent his life soaking in her soulful, open-hearted records, it felt almost like he was talking to a stranger. When they finally got into the studio, it didn't exactly smooth out. Luther came in ready to share ideas and guide the sound, but Aretha wasn't hearing it. To her, the thought of someone she'd influenced trying to coach her felt upside down. She made it clear she didn't need instruction, especially not from someone who had studied her moves in the first place. The spark turned into fire during an argument over how to kick off the title track. Aretha pulled rank, pointing to her long list of hits, while Luther shot back that he was the one riding a fresh wave of chart success. That quick exchange was enough to make her walk away, and the air stayed tense for the rest of the project. Still, the push and pull never erased the fact that both of them respected each other's gifts. Even when they weren't on speaking terms, the admiration lingered. It was less about dislike and more about two giants refusing to shrink in each other's presence.